Hi everyone, I'll be starting the live in about 2-3 minutes. Just wait for people to join on, and today's topic will be stretching and range of movement. Hi everyone that's just started to join. How's everyone doing today? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me well. I'm not entirely sure if my headphones are working to the best standard at the moment. Just another few moments and we'll get started. So as I've said before, today's live will be on stretching and range of movement. So we'll get started in just a few more moments. Just wait for a few more people to join, and then we will get ready. Okay, so we will get started, and then people can join as and when throughout. So what we're going to talk about today is stretching a range of movements, that's range of motion. It can vary between which people call it. So what we'll do is talk about what stretching is, the different types of stretching, when it's best to use it, when it's advised not to use it, and then also the like timescales and all that kind of stuff for using it. And then also we will then talk about range of motion / range of movement and what it is and when we will use it. So in terms of stretching, what we'll do is start off with like its definition. So as you're aware, stretching is very, very important. It is vital for most training programs and anyone who's being active as well. So stretching is normally defined as the application of force to musculoskeletal structures in order to achieve a change in length. Usually its purpose is improving joint range of movement / motion, reducing stiffness, soreness, or preparing for physical activity. However, later on we'll explain why that one is being argued right now in literature. So stretching generally is used to increase flexibility, and it does tend to be quite uncomfortable. Its purpose is to improve a person's stretch tolerance by relatively extreme positions. So in that the tendons and the muscles are being put under an unusual tensile stress. So stretching as a foundation is not clearly intended to be seen as helpful. So generally, there is a lot of things going on right now in literature stating that stretching before actually exercising is not good for you. However, there are different types of stretching which you can actually do before, and this is where we kind of need to delve in a little bit deeper as to the arguments between the for and the against. because stretching can normally be seen as like quite a therapeutic thing, especially after training sessions and after gym session and after workouts, and also just sometimes throughout the day as well if you're feeling quite stiff and really just want to try and to relax. So sometimes the phrase of stretching itself is being contradicted quite a lot, as obviously it has several different purposes. So obviously the main purpose of stretching is to help stretch the contractile fibers and to help stretch the muscle. But unfortunately, sometimes it can be done incorrectly. Some people tend to stretch too much or for too long, and unfortunately, then that can have quite a detrimental effect on your muscles and on your tendons as well. So generally talking about what stretching does and how we kind of do it, it's generally been accepted to increase the flexibility of muscle tendon units, and it promotes performances and decreases the number of injuries, generally speaking. Stretching exercises are regularly included in warm-ups, cool-downs, and other forms of exercises. However, as we stated, there's a lot of contradictory findings that have been reported in literature. There are quite a lot of papers out at the moment. Several ones that I've looked at myself have suggested that stretching is beneficial in regards to injury prevention. However, it's not stating as using it before exercising, using it during exercising. It's more the purpose of afterwards and helping you recover, so then you're prepared for your next sort of session. So the only issue is obviously they can't always test certain things. So scientifically, it has had quite a lot of contradictions against each other. So some are saying it is working, some are saying it hasn't. It kind of depends on what papers you've read and kind of how it's been tested, because sometimes ethically you can't test certain exercises and you can't obviously cause someone an injury. So in that aspect, the research isn't always the best. But in the ones that I've read, it says scientifically based on prescription for exercises that, or stretching exercises that exists, there's no conclusive statement made in relation to stretching an athlete's injury prior to exercising. So whether they've done something before and then they've gone and stretched and then something else afterwards, it's more about the recovery afterwards. So generally it's seen with exercises or like activities that are quite high impact, that are causing a lot of tension on the muscles and on the tendons, that generally you need a more dynamic type warm-up, and it seemed to have a better effect because it's allowing the body to prepare itself to start absorbing and taking shock and obviously being twisted and lengthened. And those that are more like low impact, so like running, well, not running, well, jogging and swimming, generally you want to have a less dynamic type warm up. You still need to warm up maybe like 5-10 minutes, but you don't have to do as much of a dynamic warm up as you would for a half an hour to 90-minute high intensity exercise or activity. So basically what we want to encounter is the amount of energy absorption that your body is going to take on. So obviously for stuff that you're doing a lot of jumping and really high impact running and twisting, turning, you need a really strong warm up. So we would recommend between 10 to 30 minutes, depending on the duration and obviously on times that you can have. We would say a minimum of a good 10 minutes of dynamic warm up, and then the later stages, we say about 30 minutes. You wouldn't need anything more than that because then obviously your body's already prepared. So in terms of exercises like jogging and swimming, we'd say probably between 5 to 10 minutes, just doing like nice simple dynamic stuff. So kind of like a little bit of leg swings. You can do monster walks, which I do quite a lot with my clients in terms of activation for the glutes. and then you can also do a few glute bridges, and then you can do a little bit of like a light walk and a steady jog, just to make sure that your muscles are warm and they're prepared. So that's generally why we would say to stretch afterwards, as your muscles are already warm and prepared, so therefore they're not cold, because when muscles are cold, generally you are going to have more of a stretch. It will feel a little bit tighter, and obviously when you're at that stage, we don't want you to then overstretch it, and then unfortunately the fibers then tear or you strain the muscle. So it's really important when you are stretching to make sure that your body is nice and warm, which is why it's really highly recommended to be performed afterwards. So there are many different types of stretching. As I've already mentioned, generally I've mentioned more dynamic stretching at the moment. Stretching afterwards, we'd always say, is more static. So static stretching is literally just me coming across, holding my arm, quads hold, hamstrings, like any single muscle stretch is known as static. So the ones that we commonly use as therapists and in the sporting world will be dynamic, static, and PNF. So PNF for us is one that we would tend to do more, especially with those that are coming back from injuries and those that have had some sort of issue or aren't as confident or don't know the right stretches to do. So these are stretches that we do with you and for you. We'd get you to do some sort of interaction. So normally it would be either contract, relax, or control, hold, relax, and all that kind of stuff. So with that, we'd obviously explain that through with you and kind of go between it. So generally, in terms of holding a stretch, we'd say between 10 to 30 seconds. 10 seconds is very, very minimal. 30 seconds is seen to kind of be the optimum time. So depending on the type of activity you've done, sometimes you can, yes, hold it for 1 minute. However, if you are holding for a minute, you have to make sure that you're not overstretching it. You're not in too much of a strain that you are feeling pain through the legs. You're not meant to feel pain, ideally, when you are stretching. You should feel a little bit of tightness, but not so much that you're starting to feel pain, because then the contractile tissue is just stretching too much. So in terms of the types of stretching, I have obviously done my Instagram post on that. So if you'd like to refer back to that for a little bit more detail, we have got that on there. But in terms of different types of stretching, so we have active. So these are stretches that you would perform yourself. So these can be a single leg raise. So for this one, you'd have more tension in the hip flexors. So you'd use them to elevate the leg up. You can be lying on your back, or you can also do this standing up. And then you have passive ones. So these are ones generally performed by us, or they are ones that you perform but you hold it for a little bit longer. So this is normally kind of like a split type exercise, or if we're doing a hamstring stretch for you where we're having you lying down, kind of like a single leg raise, exactly the same, but we're just passively moving your leg up for you. And then we also have your dynamic stretching. So that's the ones that we would say to do before exercise. So commonly, dynamic stretching is very, very broad. It's quite different. There's loads of things you can do. So obviously, when you look at warm-ups in terms of people who are doing sports, generally the more dynamic the exercises in terms of change of direction and movements of joints, the better the warm-up is. Some aren't always the best, unfortunately. Some people don't always know what to do and how to do it. So what we always do when I have my clients, I always bring them in, always get them onto the bike first, or onto the rowing machine, depending on their injury. So if they've got an upper limb injury, generally I get them onto the bike. If they've got a lower limb injury, then I will try and get them onto the bike as well. Sometimes a little bit of the rower, depending on the how bad the injury is. And then what you'll kind of do is that will start to increase your temperature, get the blood flowing, a little bit more circulation, and then that will get your muscles ready and prepared, which is very, very important. If your muscles are, like we said, are cold, they're not ready, they're very strained, they're tight, you're not going to have the workout or the activity or the exercise or training session that you want to have, because your body is not prepared. So it's really important that you make sure that you do warm up effectively. So for us, we normally do between 5 to 10 minute warm up, then get them doing a little bit of muscle activation, which is really important. So as I said before, monster walks, glute bridges, leg swings, nice and simple. If you're doing it for the arms, then you can swing your arms across. Sometimes you can also use the ski machines if you've got them as well. They're quite good. But it's really important that you kind of judge it based on how you feel. So generally, if you're doing a warm up, you would want to feel like a little bit out of breath, not too much that you're like panting, but enough that you are feeling it and you are feeling quite warm. If you're not feeling warm enough, then you're not ready. You need to keep warming up. And then you also have acute and chronic stretching. So acute stretching will refer to the stretching straight away after exercise. So this can be one or two stretches that can be held for quite a short period of time. So this is what we said, by between the 10 to 30 seconds. That's generally quite an acute stretch, whereas a chronic one is one that is longer. So generally 30 seconds to a minute, but then it's also repeated as well. So you can either repeat this daily or you can repeat it one or two times throughout the day. So as I said before, from research, it suggests that generally dynamic stretching is the best and is the most recommended one. However, if you do want to do some form of static exercises or PNF exercises before you start training or doing a session, it is recommended that you do leave like a 5-minute interval period where you do a little bit more of a dynamic type warm up. So whether that is going for a light jog or like a little bit of a walk before, then that's fine. However, it's not really highly recommended because, as research says, it's actually said to have quite a negative effect if you do actually do static and PNF stretches before, because it's stretching the muscles too much and they're not prepared for it, unfortunately. And then that will, in hindsight, unfortunately lead to an injury, which is obviously not what you want from that session. So in terms of the benefits of stretching after training or exercise, stretching can improve circulation, muscle flexibility, range of motion, and consequently help athletes perform better in their next workout or competition. And obviously for general people, the next time you go for your run or the next time you go out with friends and have a really active day. So whether that is going shopping and lifting quite a lot of shopping bags, or just going for a walk with your dog or your children, then again, it will help you with that. When exercising, muscles repetitively will flex and contract. So when stretching, this causes the muscles to lengthen and relax, therefore resulting in the ability to maximize muscle engagement in your next workout, which is obviously what you want and what we will want for you. Obviously, like we said, it increases circulation. So with the increase of circulation, you'll then have more nutrients going to the body and into your muscles. And obviously that's very, very important. We want to make sure that when you are stretching, that you are actually also draining away a lactic acid. As a buildup of lactic acid is not good. You're not going to be performing at your best, and you're going to have quite a lot of soreness. So when you are stretching, the more increased blood flow you have, the more increased circulation you have, the better it is for you. So then it will help you a lot more later on down the line. So in terms of stretching and tips on what to do and what not to do, generally what it advises, don't think stretching is a warm-up. It's not. If you stretch your muscles, like I said before, when they're cold, it can lead to injury. Like I said as well, before stretching, make sure you do a light walk, a little bit of jog, maybe a little bit of a bike ride for 5-10 minutes. Even better, like I said before, stretching after a workout again. And it's like, don't strive in terms of like your stretching to be, oh, I want to be flexible like a dancer, or I want to be flexible like someone who's half my age, or I want to be flexible like I was when I was a child. Unfortunately, that's not exactly realistic because everybody's body is different. So you have to find out what works for you and what doesn't work for you and what your flexibility range is. So if you start to feel a really, really tight pull and you start to feel pain, that's when you know you've gone too far with your stretch. So then from there, you have to ease back. But there's nothing wrong with starting a stretch quite light and gentle first and then going deeper into it, because then that way you can build up and find what your stretch tolerance is. Another one is focus on major muscle groups as well. Some people don't do that. They generally just kind of focus, oh, okay, my back's hurting, so I'm just going to stretch this one position. If you have, and the same thing with legs, okay, so my quads are a bit tight, but I'm just going to stretch them. You need to focus on everything that works together. So muscles work in pairs. So when my hamstrings are working, my hamstrings relax, but then it will be opposite. So it's really important that you will stretch them both together. So if you are doing any form of stretching, it's always best to probably do a full body one rather than just a quick, okay, this part's really tight, let me just stretch that, and then a few days later the same thing kind of occurs or you have it somewhere else. So it's really important that you do full body stretches rather than just a quick 1-2, okay, I've held it for 30 seconds, let me go away. It's also important that you do not bounce when you're stretching. I've seen that quite a lot in clubs with athletes, in the gym, and then occasionally sometimes with clients before they have kind of gone for a stretch with us. So it's really important that it's a nice smooth movement, as bouncing a muscle will contribute to the whole elastic effect. So it will stretch, it will relax, and it will kind of keep doing the same thing. And obviously that's going to overwork your muscle and it's going to keep firing and keep activating. And that's not what we want. We want to have a nice smooth movement where it's stretching enough, but not enough that it's going to have an elastic band effect and it's going to stretch all the way back. We want to start to slowly increase the muscle length, allowing it to grow and build, and in hindsight then become more flexible. Also, depending on the activity that you are doing, make the stretches specific to that activity. So if you are doing obviously running and stuff, really focus on the lower limbs. So make sure you're working on your stretching your glutes and your hamstrings and your hip flexors afterwards. Calves as well, really important. And also your upper body, because most people think, oh, okay, I'm going for a run, my legs are feeling really sore. Same thing for a walk, my legs are feeling really sore afterwards. Okay, yes, you have used them, but you've also used your upper body as well, because naturally your arms will start moving. So it's really important that you also stretch your upper body at the same time, which is why we always say, if you are doing some form of stretching, always try to make it a whole body thing. Sorry, just have a sip of water. And also sometimes it's really good to keep stretching as well. So it's not overstretching, it's not stretching like 5 times a day. That's a bit too excessive. But for some people, especially for my clients, I would highly recommend, for those that have been quite tight or have been highly active and haven't really stretched as much, to try and stretch in the mornings and try and stretch in the evenings before they go to sleep, just so then you're recovering more and you're a bit more prepared for the day. Obviously for a lot of people as well, when they feel quite stiff, stretching is generally quite good. Again, as we said, make sure that your muscles are warmed up. Yes, I can understand if you're in a desk environment and you're feeling a bit stiff, you will just naturally go to stretch, which is fine, but make sure that your muscles aren't cold. So if you have been, try and use a little bit of heat, just to kind of warm the muscle up a little bit, because then the fibers and the contractile tissues are prepared and ready to actually move and be lengthened. So I would suggest sometimes using a little bit of heat with it, just to kind of entice the stretch a little bit more. Also make sure with stretching that it's nice and gentle. Again, like I said, you don't want to stretch those fibers too far. You don't want to feel that pull and that pain. So again, it's really, really important that you are being nice and gentle with your stretches. So in terms of stretches, we will put up a few different types. And if you have got any questions on which ones to do for certain areas, then just let us know and we can obviously do a link for you, and we might also do a live on actual stretching itself. So certain movements and stretches that we would do with clients who are suffering with flexibility in certain different ranges, just so then we can target them a little bit. But we're going to move on to range of movement slash motion. So for us, this is quite a big thing in the clinical world and in the athletic world as well. So range of movement and stretching are very, very different, but they are closely linked together. So range of movement exercises are stretching tissues involving tendons, ligaments, and obviously the joint itself. So in terms of range of movement, the idea is to keep movements within the boundaries of the tissue and not overdo it. So basically, a range of movement can be as simple as just me bending my wrists, me clenching my hands, and the same thing, me spreading my fingers. These are all simple range of movement exercises. Same thing for your foot, bringing your foot towards you is dorsiflexion, pointing your toes slash your foot is plantar flexion. So they're all just really simple things, but they can be limited and they can also have their own issues. So again, with stretching, there are loads of conflicting theories behind what's good and what's bad, and how it is affected and when it is best to do it. So range of movement at a joint is always determined as static or passive, whereas an actual expression of range of movement in sport is normally determined as a dynamic movement. So as a desirable property of movement, it links between stretching and flexibility. As stated, the effectiveness of a movement's ability is based on balance or static and dynamic positions and motions that the tissue may be conditioned to so that it withstands twists and shocks. So basically, in terms of recovery, stretching seeks to achieve a motion that is pain-free and coordinated. However, there are other activities and modalities and things that we can use as well to help increase and make the range better. So like I said before, you can use heat, sometimes using cold, so ice can also work, vibrations, massage, hydrotherapy, and other modalities as well can be used to help with range of movement. So for us, in terms of the clinical world, we will do things called mobilizations. So this is when we will passively move a joint. So for example, if someone's come back from an ankle sprain, or for the knee, if they come back with a meniscal tear or shoulder dislocations, anything that's kind of restricted or limited that range, we will generally perform mobilizations with a client. So this is working in, generally speaking, a pain-free range. It will always be pain-free. If you have a little bit of pain, we will work to that pain and then we will ease off of it. And what we're doing is working with the joint itself. So unlike chiropractors and other osteopaths and stuff, we won't cause the click in joints. We'll take it to its anatomical position. So it can be as simple as me with the wrist, can't really do it yourself, but I'll kind of explain it. So if I'm limited to about that with my range, what we'll do is we'll work nice and softly into that range. So we have different ranges where we can be quite soft, so grade 1s, grade 2s a little bit more, 3s, and then a grade 4, which is working to the end of the range. That will generally simulate a little bit of pain. However, normally it doesn't. But it's really important that you work with the joint. You don't try to over exceed it. You don't try to cause hyperextension. So it's really important with range of movement that you are looking after your body and you are going to the range that you feel comfortable with. So if you are starting to feel pain, that's your indication to ease off. So range of movement, range of motion is used quite a lot. Obviously, every exercise you do is some form of movement and it's some form of range of movement. there are two big things that actually influence range of movement, which will be age and gender. So researchers have shown that there is a difference in range of motion, difference between the ranges. So in papers that I've read, specifically one, they actually tested 40 male and females, 40 males and 40 males and 40 females. And what they did was got them to do different types of range of movement exercises at different points of the day, and then they measured the different ranges of that joint. So each joint we have will have a specific range in which it can go to. So when they did it and performed it, they found that nearly 45% of young people and older people had differences in foot range of movement. So the younger people generally had more inversion and eversion, so when your foot goes in and when your foot goes out. However, there wasn't as much of a gap between the two. So when younger people were injured, they generally still had more range than what elder people did. And then when they looked at range of movement in the wrists and in the hands, it showed that 30% of women actually had more range than what men did. So what that kind of suggests is it doesn't make a difference whether you're male or like it doesn't make a difference based necessarily on your age and based on your gender. It just depends on what your kind of movement and range is. So yes, it will say, okay, women generally tend to seem to be as a lot more flexible than men. However, that also depends on difference in joint sizes, contractile strengths, ligaments, tendons, everything. So it depends on the musculoskeletal structures around it and how they kind of move. So obviously, yes, research says this, but then everyone's body is different. So looking at general population sometimes can't always interact. Obviously, people who then played sports, people that are then highly active, people that are static, people that work on desk jobs, everyone's going to be completely different. So sometimes with the paper like this, unfortunately, it was just general population, so it didn't specify whether someone was active or whether there wasn't, and whether they did do quite a lot of stretching or not before. But obviously, in terms of limitations to range of movement, this can happen due to anything. So this can normally and most commonly happen because of arthritis, which then limits the joint and causes it to be a bit more stiff, so therefore limiting your range of movement, but then also injury as well. So regaining range of movement in a joint is the first phase of rehabilitation. It's the one that we always focus on, especially making sure that it's pain free as much as we can. Unfortunately, we can't always guarantee that something's going to be pain free. So for us, we focus purely on making sure that we have full range or majority of the range back when it comes to certain injuries, specifically for the shoulders and knees myself. It's the first thing I will work on with a client. I will not move on to doing certain exercises or certain strength training until they reach a certain range, just because I know it's not going to be as an effective as an exercise if I haven't got that range, because with certain exercises, in order to activate certain muscles or use certain muscles, you have to get to a certain point of a range. So therefore, it's really, really important that we always focus on making sure that someone has full range or majority of their range back before we move on to anything else in rehabilitation. So in terms of performing range of movement exercises, generally you should perform them for about 15 to 20 seconds. So it can just literally be as simple as just bringing your hand through a range. Again, like I said before, going in and out as well. Same thing with ankles, knees. You have your main joints. So obviously we have our shoulders, elbow, our wrists, hip, knee, and ankle. So there are six peripheral joints. So generally we'll focus on them. Obviously you have also got your joints in between from your neck, so your vertebral joints. and then obviously the ones in between your fingers and your toes as well. However, generally we won't focus on them as much because generally we'll focus on the larger areas, especially the ones that are more commonly injured as well. But it's really, really important that when you are focusing on one joint, you do focus on the joint above and below as well, because generally they will be affected. So if someone has suffered with a knee injury, normally they will have some sort of hip or ankle problem at the same time due to compensation and due to a change in loading and shifting. So it's always really, really important that you do go through other ranges at the same time. In terms of types of range of movement, there is active, passive, and then obviously the limited in range of movement. So active is one that will get you to do yourself. So if I ask you to bring your wrists in, that would be an active movement. A passive one is one that I'm performing for you. So I'll then bring your wrist into flexion for you and then into extension just to assess the range. With that, when we are performing it passively, we will also kind of get a feel for the joint to see if we are feeling any restrictions, as well as for you, because you'll generally only go to the range in which you have no pain or you don't feel restriction. So what we'll do is try and take you a little bit further to see if it's more of a structural issue or if it's more a ligament, tendon or muscular issue. So it's really important, if you have got limitations in range of movement, that you look at what else is kind of going on. So if you are feeling tight in your muscles, this can also limit your range of movement. And the same thing if your tendons are feeling very taut and very strong, you are feeling a little bit of pain in them. Again, make sure you check range of movement. And then obviously, generally, if you are restricted in range of movement and you have suffered from certain injuries, it will be a little bit more, sometimes more likely that it might be an actual structural issue in terms of the joint itself. So for knee injuries, generally we will always try to clear the meniscus and then obviously the ligaments first before kind of looking at the muscles, just to make sure there's nothing else kind of underlying going on. Especially for those people that are experiencing limps or they have fallen or performed a certain change of direction sort of movement, it's really important that we check that they have full range before kind of moving on, because if there's a limitation in range, there might be more than just one or two things kind of going on. So it's always important with range of range of movement that you focus on more than just one thing. So unlike stretching, normally if you feel pain or anything, you know, it's generally more muscular, whereas with range of movement and range of motion, it has quite a few more limitations itself. Obviously I've gone through quite a lot today, and quite a bit in detail with some of it. There is obviously a lot of literatures and papers out there. However, we are obviously more than happy to answer some questions for you. So if anyone's got any questions that they'd like to ask me about stretching or like optimal times or anything like that, then just shoot now and let me know. Okay, I don't think we're going to get any questions today. So if anyone who's re-watching has any questions, then you can drop us a message on the chat. You can either put it on the post or you can message us directly, or you can also head over to our Instagram page and drop us any questions. Thank you so much to everyone who's listened, and hope everyone who's going to watch this back enjoys it. Hope everyone has a good week, and if you've got any issues or any problems, then just drop us a call, drop us a message, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very much, guys.